I think we're going to go ahead and get started now. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Beta Sai. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. This is actually the first Zoom press conference we're having, so this is like a big moment. It's hard to do this without seeing all the signs that say driver power, union power, and hearing all our members out on the steps of City Hall or anywhere else in the streets of New York City, shouting in unity. But we're so pleased to be able to have this meeting today, and we hope that you're all doing well. And we know that reporters are also essential workers like drivers, and so we want to thank you for the work that you've continued to do, and thank you for covering our press conference today. So, I feel really proud to be able to announce that the Taxi Workers Alliance and 4 of our members have filed a lawsuit against Governor Cuomo and the Department of Labor and the Commissioner of Labor, Roberta Reardon, for essentially delaying what is in this moment a life-saving benefit. We all know throughout the labor history of our country, that unemployment benefits were fought for as really a saving grace for workers in moments of crisis. And when we in 2016, with a group of our members, fought for unemployment for Uber drivers, which we knew would be found to be employees under the law and would eventually be covered for this benefit, we understood it as a safety net. Nobody would have known back then that 4 years later, that safety net would really be the life-saving tool for thousands and thousands of drivers and our families. And it is just unconscionable that basically the Department of Labor is continuing to violate its own legal finding, all to suit the needs of these corporations. By not processing drivers under regular state unemployment, it has meant that for men and women completely out of work, were already under poverty before COVID started and amplified, the poverty across our society, including for drivers, that they are being denied the same timeline to this life-saving benefit that every other worker that's been found to be an employee under the same law. It is such a gross violation of equal protection. And it's happening to a workforce that is in dire need. They're considered essential workers. So it seems like when we need drivers out on the streets to take the risk, then they're being valued. But when they're asking for a benefit that their labor has earned, they're being treated as second-class citizens, and that's not acceptable. Based on a survey that we did, and I don't even know if survey is the right word. It's actually a needs assessment that we put out for drivers along with a resources guide. We were stunned to find that close to 83% of drivers said that either they had run out of money for food and groceries, or they're close to running out of money for food and groceries. So, the majority of them have not had enough money to pay for rent or their house mortgage. And while there is a moratorium on evictions right now, that moratorium will end. And landlords are going to go back to court and start to take action again. And so this is going to be a vicious cycle for thousands of families. There are over 100,000 Uber drivers alone in the state of New York. According to a study commissioned by the Taxi and Limousine Commission, Uber would be considered the largest private sector employer in the entire state of New York, with over 100,000 workers. So just imagine that in the middle of a pandemic, in the epicenter of the pandemic, the largest employer of the state is not being forced or required to follow an existing law. And instead, over 100,000 of its workers are suffering. They're going deeper into poverty and debt. And the national conversation about the gig economy always focuses on, the gray area of whether or not the workers are employees. But we want to make this explicitly clear. It's not just us saying that the drivers are employees for the purposes of unemployment law. The Department of Labor itself found drivers to be employees for unemployment law. When Uber challenged that finding, the case went to a trial. An administrative law judge found the drivers to be employees. Uber challenged that ruling. It went before an appeals board, the highest executive, legal body on the issue. And the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board also found the drivers to be employees. The law is clear on this. There is no way out for these companies. There is no way out for their political champions. What is happening right now is purely an ideological position, and it is cruel and it feels vindictive. And it's punishing 100,000 workers who right now, families are barely scraping by for the most basic necessities of food and groceries. It's not acceptable. And so it brings us no pleasure to have to say that we had to go to court, that in a time period when we ourselves, Taxi Workers Alliance, knows of at least 51 drivers that have died from COVID, we are getting phone calls from drivers sitting in emergency rooms. The drivers saying, I don't know what's going to happen to me. I barely have $1,000 left in my bank account. Can you make sure my family is going to be okay? In this kind of an environment, we should not have to file a lawsuit in order to ask our Department of Labor to follow a law and protect workers that a labor department is tasked to do both legally and really morally and ethically. This is such a gross violation, and we're having to file this lawsuit in the worst of conditions, and it's a horrible feeling to know that we need to take our governor again back to court. We appreciate the fact that he feels everybody's pain. What about the pain of poverty and the pain that's coming from violating a basic law by his own labor department? So we filed this action, and on this call today, we're going to be hearing from our attorneys. This action was filed by both the Taxi Workers Alliance. We are also a plaintiff, and our staff attorney is a legal counsel on this case, as well as by Nicole Sock of Brooklyn Legal Services. And so first we're going to hear from the attorneys about the actual lawsuit itself, and then we're going to be hearing from really the people for whom this, without whom this lawsuit was not possible, and who are really, through their four voices, are representing the interests and the plight and the pain of 100,000 of their brothers and sisters. We're going to be hearing from two of the plaintiffs, as well as from one of our key allies in this struggle, from the National Employment Law Project. Okay, so we're going to begin by having Nicole Sock, Brooklyn Legal Services, to talk about the litigation. Over to you, Nicole.
Okay, thank you, Barabee. It is an honor, frankly, to work with the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. We've been working with you for many years, and you do just the most important work. And so we're actually a team of lawyers. It is not just me. There's several folks at Legal Services NYC who are working on this lawsuit, along with counsel from the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. Just a 1 second background about Legal Services NYC. We have been around since the late 60s. We are the largest provider of civil legal services in the entire country, and we primarily represent low-income folks. That is our mission. We are an anti-poverty organization, and so this is exactly what we're very happy to be helping to be working on. Unfortunately, under very difficult circumstances, and something that frankly we shouldn't have to do, because as Barabee has said, the law is clear. Uber drivers and really all app-based workers at this point who work for FHV, for hire vehicle companies, are clearly employees under New York State unemployment insurance law. The complaint brings, there's basically two claims in the complaint. The first is under the Social Security Act when due clause. That means that benefits must be paid when due. They are clearly not being paid when due. It has to be paid as quickly as possible, and that is absolutely not happening. The Department of Labor and the Governor and the Commissioner of Labor are breaking the law. The other claim that we have brought this case that we are bringing is an equal protection claim. Basically, that the state is not providing equal protection of the laws, that it is treating some employees, some workers different than other workers. So if you are a W-2 worker and your employer does the right thing and reports your earnings, the right thing, you will get benefits within 2 to 3 weeks in most cases. Even during this pandemic, even though there has been a lot of problems, the vast majority of folks who are regular W-2 employees, whose employers do the right thing and report their wages and contribute to the system, as all employers must do to make this system work, it falls. If employers do not pay into the system, it falls down. And so those employees are getting benefits within 2 to 3 weeks. Drivers, app-based drivers, Uber and Lyft drivers are not getting their benefits. They've been waiting for months. The process that they must go through is a reconsideration process if they have the hope of getting those benefits. It is an incredibly cumbersome process. It is completely unfair. Folks have to, fax in. They have to find a fax to go and fax in their earnings. It takes months in good times. Months in good times, and we are not in good times right now. The other thing that I want to point out as well is that this process that thousands of drivers are forced to do, not because of anything they've done wrong, but because their employers, these app-based companies, Uber and Lyft, have failed to follow the law, and the Department of Labor has failed to force them to follow the law to report their earnings. It is not their fault that they have to go through this reconsideration process, that it takes months. Many of them, give up, frankly, because it's so difficult. They're not getting benefits. That process is one that is incredibly unnecessary. It creates huge delays, and it takes months often to get those benefits, to get benefits because the earnings are not being reported. Essentially, what the DOL is allowing to happen is it's allowing one group of employers to essentially cheat the system, and everybody who's doing the right thing, it's a problem for those employees, because you think about it, at what's happening right now is there's the governor put on, or the Department of Labor put on, all these additional frontline DOL workers. Why? Because there was a huge amount of claims, right? If you think about how many of those folks are going to have to put their time, and they've been working long hours themselves, these frontline DOL workers, they're workers and they're working hard. They have had to spend all of their time, or much of their time, to deal with this issue, which is completely unnecessary. If the Department of Labor followed the law and made Uber follow the law and Lyft to report those earnings, this would be a seamless process, and there wouldn't be huge delays, and it wouldn't cause problems for the system as a whole. But when you think about how thousands and thousands of drivers are having to speak to somebody on the Department of Labor unnecessarily, having to send in all these documents, having to have those documents individually looked at, it gums up the system. And so it's bad for everybody. So I just want to say that thank you, Barabee, and thank you, drivers, for willing to put yourself out there. The members of the Taxi Workers Alliance who've decided to come forward and to bring this lawsuit, we are really grateful to you, because this is really, really important. And it's a scary thing to sue the government. It's a scary thing to sue a popular governor, but it has to be done right now. And so we really applaud our individual plaintiffs who've come forward to do this. It is really, really courageous, and we want to thank you. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm going to turn it over now to our staff, the staff attorney, or the general counsel, I should say, for the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, Zubin Soleimani.
Uh, Hi, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming to talk today. Um, what I want to talk about is just the clarity of the law in this area. We'll most likely hear that there's some gray area about the employment status of Uber drivers, of Lyft drivers. And at this point, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's not the case. We know this because we have a final decision from July of 2018 from the Unemployment Insurance Appeal Board that says Uber drivers in New York City and all similarly situated drivers, workers with the same conditions, are employees with a right to UI. Uber did not appeal that decision to the state courts, so it's final. We know it because 2 months ago, the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state of New York, said that Postmates workers, who are app-based workers with similar terms and conditions to Uber drivers, so that they are employees for purposes of unemployment insurance law. We know this applies to Uber because Uber is challenging another unemployment case right now about an upstate driver. And their brief submitted in January more or less said, we rely on the court's decision in Postmates. Postmates was right. We should follow that. The decision they relied on was overturned. So it's the end of the line for them. We also know it because Governor Cuomo said in his State of the State address that the misclassification of app-based workers is a fraud and a sham, and it has to stop now. And we hope it will. Unfortunately, right now it's a little too late. We hope for the best outcome for everybody going forward, but what could have happened is if that decision from 2018 were followed, the DOL, in enforcing that decision, would have made the companies turn over their earnings data immediately, and we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now when drivers need it the most. It would have been a seamless process where they look up their social security number, see their earnings, and they get benefits in 2 to 3 weeks. How do we know that that would actually happen? Well, we know because one of the plaintiffs in this case, Mr. Ruman, he drove mostly, but he worked part-time at a Subway restaurant where he was paid on a W-2. He got a benefit rate for his earnings from Subway in 2.5 weeks. It's very low. It's 155. It would be the maximum, 504 if the DOL counted as benefit rates. More than 8 weeks later, he's still waiting for that. Most folks are still waiting completely. And this issue of unemployment status, it's not an academic one, right? It's not irrelevant just because there's a federal program for independent contractors called pandemic unemployment assistance. Indeed, that's part of the problem is, for the people who have to wait for pandemic unemployment assistance, it's unfortunate, but that's the only option. But it was not the only option for drivers, right? Putting people into that process that's meant for true independent contractors, where they're entitled to UI, is delaying them by a month and a half or more. If you applied in March 15th, you should have been getting benefits in 2 weeks, not waiting till the end of May. Further, pandemic is based on your net income versus your gross income. For the vast majority of drivers, their gross income far exceeds their net income and will leave them with a much lower benefit rate. So, part of the history of how we got here, unfortunately, we're seeing this repeat itself. This is not the first time that we have had to bring a lawsuit against the governor and the DOL. We didn't think we would have to do this again once the DOL had issued its final decisions. But 4 years ago, our first member who filed for unemployment was waiting for 10 months with no action being taken on his application. He received emails from the DOL that said his claim was under executive review, which meant the Department of Labor wouldn't be making the determination of whether that was employment or not. After that case was filed, they moved immediately and he got benefits. And our understanding is that every Uber driver since then who has applied for unemployment has ultimately been found to be an employee. So there shouldn't be any confusion on this point. The notion that somehow this law, the determinations of law here is unsettled is simply absurd. So we look forward to seeing a court make the DOL do its job, and that in future cases, when folks need unemployment for any reason, whether it's related to the pandemic or not, that they get those benefits, which are emergency benefits, to tide you over as quickly as possible. Again, I want to thank all the folks at Legal Services NYC for their tireless dedication to this work. It's not just on this case, but in the last 4 years of fighting for drivers' rights to these benefits, and to Mr. Islam, Mr. Ouattara, and the other plaintiffs for having the courage to go up and make these claims, not just for themselves, but with the understanding that hopefully there will be an outcome that benefits all of the other drivers as well.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you, Zubin. I see that I see Dan and I think some of the other reporters are raising their hand right now for a question. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna go ahead and have our two driver plaintiffs speak, and then we just have 3 more speakers, so we're actually almost done, and then we'll be able to open it up to Q&A. So, as Zubin and Nicole have said, we're so proud and we're so thankful to the 4 plaintiffs who really are such heroes. I mean, it was the 3 driver heroes in 2016 through 2018 who fought in order to win this in the first place. And today, again, we see another set of heroes who, in the middle of the pandemic, and I think one of the hardest times of their lives, are standing up, and they're standing up for justice. Takes a lot of courage, a lot of determination, and takes a lot of sacrifice for time and coordination. And so we on behalf of the Taxi Workers Alliance, we want to thank all of you, to our brothers and to your families, for coming forward and becoming plaintiffs in this lawsuit. So we're first going to hear from one of the plaintiffs, Brother Do Seydou Ouattara. Gonna turn it over to him.
All right, hi, this is Seydou Ouattara. I've been driving for Uber for the past 4 years. It's a very sad situation from my point of view. As a driver, we drove for Uber for like very long hours, almost like seven days a week. That was not, something we expected to have like happening right now. We didn't expect to have any lawsuit, but we have to do it because it's unfair. So I filed my claim back on April 1st, 2020. And I pretty much spend like every day, I have to like call the Department of Labor almost at least 500 times a day. So I never got anyone on the phone, never got anyone up to like 2 weeks. And then, I have a call from a DOL because they changed the system of processing. So they have, instead of people calling them, they have to get people to call the applicant. So I got a call from one of them asking me, all the basic questions. When we got to the employment situation, he asked me if I was either an employee or self-employed. And I responded I was an employee because I work for Uber as a driver. And surprisingly, as an agent, it tells me that I'm not an employee, I'm self-employed because I drive for Uber. And I tried to explain to him that we have a special rule because we have, as an Uber driver in New York City, in New York State, we have a special rule where it says like, for the purpose of an employment, the driver are considered to be employees. He responded that we can't be employees because we don't have W-2 form, we have the 1099. So that was shocking to me because I wasn't expecting that from him, because when I applied, I really specifically said I was an employee from Uber. But I have to go by whatever you were saying, and it put me as a self-employed. So I waited until like May 13 to have this letter here from the state of labor, from the Labor Department, telling me that I have zero income. Zero income, meaning that Uber did not provide my income, my earnings, to the Department of Labor. I've been working for Uber like every day, nonstop. So I wasn't expecting to have zero income recorded on my earnings. But on the same day, I have to, I faxed over whatever it was asking me. They asked me to send back the earning history. So I filed I've processed that. I faxed over my 1099 from Uber and then my 1099 from Lyft. And then waited for like 2 more weeks, almost like a month. They called me, sent me an email on May 20, asking me to claim for pandemic unemployment assistance. So it seems like they're forcing driver to specifically file for that specific area. They're not giving like option to driver to really file for unemployment. That they're forcing driver to file for pandemic assistance, knowing that if you file for the pandemic unemployment assistance, you only get like almost a tiny portion of what you're supposed to get based on the unemployment. People get like 182 where they're supposed to get 504, which is like almost like $322 less than what we're supposed to get. I mean, how are we supposed to survive? I personally I haven't been paying for my rent for like almost 2 months. I wasn't able to pay for my insurance for almost like 2 months as well. I have to rely on food stamp to feed my family. I have 3 kids, 5, 2, and 6 months. I can't risk my kid's life because going out to work without even knowing what to expect. I don't even know what to expect outside. I'm scared too because I have 6-month baby. I don't want to go outside and have a sickness. I might be like, I might be asymptomatic, but I don't know what's gonna happen to my kid once I get back home. But I was hoping at least to be processed in the correct manner. I was hoping to get something, like at least we can't be worrying about the disease at the same time, think about how much it's stressful because you don't even know what to expect, how much you're gonna get. Are you going to get like 102 plus the $600? Or are you going to get like 504? There's nothing clear. But it should have been that way. It should have been clear because we have the ruling. Why would you not follow your ruling? It's clear. As an Uber driver, we all employees. But why do you have to get to this point? Why do we have to like wait? Took 2 months. Why do we have to wait 2 months to get something where it should have been done in 2 weeks or 3 weeks maximum? And it's sad for me, that but how we have to fight for this. We're not fighting for ourselves, but we're fighting for like every driver because we've been working hard for Uber, and we deserve something back because we're under crisis, but we also we need Uber and the government to do the right thing for us as a driver to get what we deserve. Thank you very much for listening to me, and that was my contribution.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you. I'm now going to actually turn it right over to one of the other plaintiffs, Mohammed Saiful Islam.
Yes, hello. Yes. Can you hear, guys?
Yes.
Okay. This is MD Islam. Muhammad is called, MD is like Muhammad Islam. So anyhow, I'm the Lyft driver. So I'm working with Lyft since Lyft here in the city. That's 2014, I think. Then last March 23rd, I filed for the unemployment for the as a Lyft driver. But until now, I'm not getting any penny yet. But I have the letter last week, and they approved me for like $291 for UI and $600 for the other benefit. So I don't know if it's in the bank or not. I don't know. I have to check again. So hopefully I'm getting something, but it's after almost 3 months. I get approved from them to get this money. So whatever my friends he said, everything's the same as me. He got 3 children. I have 3 children. I'm in trouble. Since it's been 3 months, I'm in trouble. I'm just lending money from others. And I'm in most frustrated guy right now about my life and about my family life. I applied for the food stamp. I'm getting food from the city. So that's the way my life is going. And I don't know next what is going to happen. And $291, they accepted me, but I don't know it's going to be good for me or not, because I have so much bills, like phone bills, rent, and so other bills too. But I don't know, I'm already frustrated. Sometimes my brain is not working, what I'm gonna do. I couldn't sleep sometime, thinking about the situation, what's gonna happen next. So thank you very for helping us to file, to the city about us. Thanks for your fighting. And that's all. And I don't know what else I'm gonna say. Whatever my other friend said, everything same as me.
Mhm.
Thank you for having me here, Barbie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, brother. You said it all. You said it so well. Thank you. So we just have one more speaker, and then we're going to open up to Q&A. So Brian Chen, who's an attorney with the National Employment Law Project.
Thanks, Baravi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a staff attorney at the National Employment Law Project, and although we are not involved in this litigation, we work closely with New York Taxi Workers Alliance and Legal Services, NYC, as part of the New York Direct Coalition. And we fully agree with our coalition partners' position here that app drivers' eligibility for state unemployment is already settled here in New York, and the state needs to make it as simple and convenient as possible for Uber and Lyft drivers to access their full benefits for regular unemployment. Misclassification happens in virtually every industry in our economy, but it is really fundamental to how app companies like Uber and Lyft operate. From their inception, these companies have insisted that they don't have to meet their employer obligations because their workers somehow are in business for themselves. They intentionally call their workers independent contractors just to unlawfully lower their operating costs. And the idea that the drivers are in business for themselves really is a blatant mischaracterization of what ride-hail work really is like. And there is nothing about receiving work through an app that somehow makes these workers less entitled to employee protections like unemployment insurance. And really, when an employer like Uber or Lyft insists on labeling their workers as contractors, it deters those workers from claiming their rights under the law. And we see that here in New York, where the law is settled that app-based drivers are employees, they're eligible for regular unemployment insurance. And yet the companies continue to tell their drivers that they only qualify for the federal PUA. So, Uber and Lyft really have done everything in their power to blur the lines of accountability. And that makes it frustrating for drivers who are really hurting and need to navigate an unemployment system that already is not the most user-friendly. So to be clear, the federal PUA is a critical lifeline for people who are falling through the gaps and who are ineligible for regular unemployment. That is undisputed. But if states like New York fail to properly administer their UI benefits and fail to ensure that people who really are employees are getting those benefits, just the availability of PUA may incentivize these low-road companies to continue to misclassify their workers and dispossess them of their legal rights. And this issue of misclassification goes well beyond Uber and Lyft, and it affects virtually every industry in the New York economy. And ultimately, this is something that the state legislature needs to address by establishing a presumption of employment across all industries, so that employers can't game the system and they can't cheat our labor laws. But today really is about the litigation, and this litigation is so needed and so critical to ensuring that app-based drivers can access their UI benefits. And although NELP is not involved in this litigation, we are fully supportive of our coalition partners and thank them for taking this much needed step.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for joining us today in solidarity.
Of course.
So I have more to say, but I see that there are a number of you want to jump in and ask some questions. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to open up the Q&A. So I'm going to call on Dan Rivoli from New York One.
Hold on. Afternoon. Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. First, I just want to, as a point of clarity, is this what in legal circles is called a putative class action? You're seeking to represent an entire class of drivers?
It's not a class action.
No. Okay. Thank you. So on to my question then, related to that are these cases unique to the drivers who are stuck in limbo and waiting months instead of weeks like you say they should be waiting? Or is this a systemic problem that is well beyond these three drivers or the drivers as plaintiffs in the lawsuit?
And so their experiences are, from what we've seen, typical of what the drivers on the whole are experiencing. And even though this isn't a class action, the specific relief we're requesting is that the DOL make immediate payments of UI benefits that are due to all. We're still requesting that relief be applied broadly through a change of policy that would produce a better outcome for all drivers as well. And that the DOL start requiring the earnings reporting as they should under the law, which would also have that impact going forward.
Thank you.
I just want to jump in, and I just want to stress, so, the Taxi Workers Alliance, like, we've been getting phone calls from over 4,000 drivers so far that we've been able to call back, and then emails from thousands of drivers. And we also have been having like every Sunday night weekly radio program where drivers are able to call in. In total, we've been engaging with over 13,000 drivers directly. This is the number one issue. The delay in unemployment is the number one issue. And, even though, there are a lot of problematic issues with unemployment in general, I think what's important to stress here is that the issues that Uber, Lyft, and other for-hire vehicle drivers in New York City are having today is because the Department of Labor and the Cuomo administration are not abiding by the law and processing these applications under regular state unemployment, and requiring that these companies like Uber and Lyft turn over earnings data. Just really quickly, I just want to say, the seriousness with which unemployment is taken under the law really needs to be understood. The Department of Labor could actually pursue the lack of cooperation by these companies to turn over the earnings data as a misdemeanor. In this case, they're not even getting a slap on their wrist, right? But look at how seriously the law itself takes it when companies don't comply. And it should be taken that seriously, because the lack of compliance means workers are, taken deeper and deeper into poverty. And especially in the middle of a pandemic, this is just really, it's unconscionable and it's unacceptable that they're being forced to, one, endure these delays, and then secondly, they're being routed into a program where they're going to be subject to a lesser benefit. It's just, it's insult upon injury. We're now gonna open up the line to Sydney Pereira.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I'm Sydney Pereira with Gothamist. And I have two questions, if you don't mind. One is specifically for the drivers who spoke, who thank you to the drivers for being on the call and speaking. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the other journalists do as well. Just to clarify, have any of you gotten any payment at all, whether that's the UI, clearly not, because that's what this is about, but for even the pandemic unemployment assistance, because I know the PUA program is specifically to try to ensure that gig workers are getting paid, and expanding it to that, expanding it to all workers who typically might not qualify for UI. And then the other question is just, I'm wondering, I don't know who would this person to speak to this, but regarding the Department of Labor not kind of enforcing or making sure employers are doing what the court rulings say that they're supposed to be doing, is it a lack of resources, or what do you all feel like the issue is here in terms of why the DOL isn't making sure employers are classifying employees correctly?
Okay, great. Thank you, Sydney. I'm gonna see if Seydu or Mr. Islam wanna want to speak, and then we'll jump in on the second question.
All right, so I have not received any penny as of this hour since I filed back in April 1st. I have not received anything. No money from 600, nothing from the pandemic unemployment system as of this hour.
I'll just add, we filed at 11:45 last night, and this morning, Mr. Wattar, I got a very timely email saying, "Hey, looks like you're getting some PUA," it's just a notification. I don't believe a payment has been made yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So exactly. So this is a promise to pay me, but I haven't got nothing. I don't know how long it's gonna take for me to get something in my account. That's what I'm really saying. Like, I haven't received any money. I just received I received an email today and a text from the Department of Labor saying like I was approved for $182, but I have not received anything from my account.
And that's $182 a week, correct?
Exactly, yeah. That it would be based. I mean, the number was like it's based on nothing. Basically, it's not based on my net income. It's not based on my gross income. It's just a number we determined without any backup. It's nothing. There's no proof. Like why we're giving me like $182.
And that 182 is the minimum weekly benefit rate under the pandemic unemployment assistance. But Zubin or Seydou, just remind us again what your benefit rate likely would be under regular unemployment.
So, go ahead, lawyer.
We ran the numbers together based on gross income. It would be the maximum rate of 504.
Yeah, correct.
And this is Nicole, just to answer the second question, I don't know if Mr. Islam wants to talk about what he received, which I think is nothing at this point. Have you received anything?
Oh, yeah, I didn't receive it anything, but last week I saw in the account, they just sent me like $291. I saw in the account, that's it. But I don't see anything yet.
Have you received it?
No, I didn't get it.
Yeah, I believe they sent you a message saying that's going to be your rate.
Yes.
So can I respond to the other part of the question, which is this a hard thing for them to do? The answer is absolutely not. It is seamless process for the Department of Labor to be able to get these earnings recorded. Every employer in the state is required, and most do the right thing. As I said, every employer in the state is required to send in quarterly contributions and quarterly reporting of the earnings of their workers. They do that. That information is tied to everybody's Social Security number. It is an automatic system in the computer. It is super easy for the Department of Labor to be able to do this. They just need to require Uber and Lyft and these companies to report these earnings, which they've failed to do. As to why they failed to do that, I think Baravi or somebody else may be able to speak to that. I have some concerns about the coziness between Uber and the administration, frankly, and I think that they are purposely not doing it. That's my opinion, and I have some concerns about that.
Yeah, I mean, the irony here is it's actually they're going by denying drivers regular UI, requiring the drivers to send in faxes, which of course is a burden on the drivers, but it's also an added burden on the Department of Labor. And then having to message drivers, oh, you need to apply for pandemic unemployment, then having to review that second application. The Department of Labor is actually going out of its way to add work, to add to its own burden in this moment of time. And the only people who benefit from this, obviously not the drivers, obviously not the other 700,000 workers across, in New York City alone that are fighting for unemployment, obviously not the Department of Labor staff itself, obviously not the public budget, which has had to pay for an increase in the staffing of the Department of Labor. The only ones that benefit here are the companies. Why the governor, who has been their champion for years now, continues to protect them is you know, I mean, I really hope that all of you ask the governor that question. You know, back in 2015 or 2016, we had to file a federal lawsuit in order to allow the Department of Labor to just investigate the claims filed by Uber drivers. I mean, just imagine that. Drivers were filing claims for unemployment, right? We all know as working people, it's an emergency benefit. You do it in the middle of a crisis. And essentially what was happening was the Department of Labor or whoever at the state level was receiving those applications. If they saw that the employer was Uber, it basically went into one pile that collected dust. Every other application where the employer was not Uber went into a track to have that claim be processed. I mean, this is just, it's such a deep sense of betrayal of the men and women, like working people who are out there on the streets making a living serving the city. Drivers collectively serve 1 million people every single day. They've been on the front lines. There have been some studies, like there was a study in England which found that at the end, when everything is all said and done around COVID, the studies are going to show that taxi drivers were among the people, not just workers, but among the population with the highest rates of death and, positive tests. I mean, drivers have been on the front lines of this for months now, well before the city and the state were shut down. And the way that they're being protected, the way their health is being looked after is they're again being put into the back of a line. And it's all to serve purely corporate interests and absolutely nothing else. I mean, look, if the governor believes that the courts acted wrongly, if he believes that the law needs to be changed, then there is a legislative process for that. You don't act in a cowardly fashion by standing behind bureaucracy to deny benefits to 100,000 workers in the middle of a pandemic. If you really believe ideologically that this company should not have to provide for unemployment as a benefit to its workers, then there's a legislative process for you to follow up on. But of course, that's not going to happen because it's not a popular political position. So instead, the political infrastructure that supports these companies is hiding behind bureaucracy and punishing the workers. And it's not acceptable. And we're counting on the courts to stand up for justice and on the side of the workers and make it clear to the state, as the courts did back in 2016, that this level of bias and cowardice is not acceptable. It's coming at a great harm to the workers and to the rest of the infrastructure of the Labor Department itself. So I see that we have a few more hands up, so we're actually going to turn it over to Emily Lang and then to Dan Rivoli.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm with WNYC. I guess my question is why, so as far as the companies reporting the earnings data, why was this not a part of the process prior to, like, let's say a driver wanted to apply for federal benefits or state benefits, would they have to individually request that the company share their earnings data? Like, why was this already not a part of the process for any type of driver trying to apply for benefits, and what did that look like before this?
Nicole or Zubin, you want to take that?
I guess I'm a little confused. I'm slightly confused by the question. Can you just clarify why? Can you clarify your question? You're saying why wasn't this an issue before? The problem is the process is for every employer, and when every employer applies for unemployment, they put it in their social security information and their employer information, and their wages are automatically in the system. So I'm if you can clarify your question, because I'm slightly confused.
Yeah, my question is why wasn't this already part of the process for Uber and Lyft to have this being done on a regular basis? Like, why is it so much of an ask to get them to give the earnings data?
Yeah, it's not an ask. It's you point out exactly the problem, because it isn't a big ask, frankly. The Department of Labor just needs to make them do it. And they should have done it, you know, a couple of years ago when there was a final decision. So we're almost 2 years past the final decision. It was in July of 2018 when there was an upper level decision regarding Uber drivers. This should have been done a very long time ago. The question that you're asking is one that really should be asked of the Department of Labor and the governor, frankly. Why didn't you do this earlier? They should have done it earlier, and they knew about it. This is something they knew about at the beginning of the pandemic. They were very aware of this issue, but what they've done, and if they've done anything, it seems like they've done nothing. And so the governor and the DOL needs to be asked, why haven't they done it? It's time that they do, and it's an easy thing for them to do. They can require the Uber and Lyft and these companies to provide this information. They need to do it now.
Can I just add to that? I think it's also a question to ask Uber and Lyft, you know, these companies directly. I mean, Uber has said a number of times now that they have agreed to submit data. Now, you know, one question is, well, was there a condition? You know, did they actually submit the data, first of all? Secondly, did they place a condition before the Department of Labor in order to turn over the data? If so, what was that condition? And boy, I don't want the Department of Labor negotiating for me, because if the condition would have been, we'll turn over the data as long as you process these applications under pandemic unemployment assistance. I mean, what did the Department of Labor at that point need the data for? You know, they sold the drivers out to get nothing. You know, I firmly believe that this has been nothing more than an ideological position. I mean, the law is clear on this. The need and the urgency is clear on this. You know, there's precedence here. The agency has known about this for years now. The companies have known about this for years now. There is no legal reason at this point, given how far the decisions have already been made by the courts in the state. There is no legal strategy here for why the data would be delayed at this point. They're simply punishing drivers. Uber and company don't want drivers to know that they have these rights. And on top of it, they want to punish the drivers, like Seydou, who said to the Department of Labor agent, no, I know my right. I know I'm supposed to be processed as an employee, because that means that, number one, I'm going to get my benefit quicker, and number two, I'm going to get the full benefit that is allowed to me under the law. You know, remember, Uber spent a lot of money on a nice little PR tour, about how they were fighting for pandemic unemployment. Don't worry, drivers. Unfortunately, we would love to give you something, but unfortunately, the law doesn't allow us to. So therefore, we're going to Congress and we're fighting for pandemic unemployment for you. And then they sent out a national email, including to drivers in New York, saying, you have to wait. Oh, good news is Congress just passed pandemic unemployment assistance. You have to wait for it to be set up, and then you'll start to get something. It was a blatant lie. The reality was the drivers in New York have had the right to access this benefit even before the pandemic. And the fact that these companies have lied about it in the middle of a pandemic, in the epicenter of the pandemic, I just think it's not acceptable. This is so unconscionable. And to have the Department of Labor, look, if there is a political disagreement by the governor, there is within our democracy, there is an avenue to pursue that, but you don't do it by unmantling the courts. That is the opposite of democracy. And if we have that standard, by the way, for a president at the national level, why are we not going to have that same standard for our governor? The law is clear on this. The courts have already spoken. They need to be, the rulings need to be executed by the Department of Labor, and both the companies and their political champions need to get out of the way and allow the law to go into process. So drivers and their families can survive and don't have to worry about food and rent in the middle of a pandemic. I see Dan also has another follow-up question.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure I understood the amount of money they're getting, because I got lost a little bit, so I just want to make sure this is accurate. The two drivers on the call, Mr. Islam and Mr. Otara, they are both approved for the federal pandemic unemployment insurance. Mr. Islam, you were approved for $291 a week, and Mr. Otara, you were approved for $182 a week. I just want to make sure that's accurate. And then a follow-up, if you can describe what the delay in getting these unemployment benefits means to you personally, as far as your financial situation goes, and what do you make of the amount you are approved for already? What good will that or will that not do as New York moves forward in this pandemic? And then if you can also just, what's the market, what's the volume of trips you're doing now? I see more people are traveling now, more people on the subway, more people in their cars. Are you seeing your business tick up? Are you still driving for Uber and Lyft?
Seydou, can we maybe?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the number is correct. I just went to my my account this morning, and I saw that I was approved for $182. That would be under the pandemic unemployment assistance. And also, the process has been hard for me personally. I'm not used to this type of, and I'm not used to be weeks or months without having any money. That's why I work hard for Uber and Lyft. I spend pretty much like 6 to 7 days a week. So it's hard for me to wait 2 months or almost 2 months without having anything. As I said earlier, I did not even pay for my rent. So I know for sure my stress came from the fact that I'm not really sure about how much I'm going to get. If I have to pay for my rent, what if my qualification falls under my rent or falls under my bills? It means I will be without any, I will be on debt. I would have to pay for additional money. Where am I going to get that money? For now, I'm getting like $782 weekly, but this is low under my expenses. So it means I will be, after receiving that amount, I still have to go find the remaining somewhere. Where am I going to get it? Am I going to get a loan from the bank? That's really the big question right now. That's why we're fighting to get the full amount. The full amount based on our work is our work. We work for that. It's $504. So why are we going to get less than that amount? There's no reason why we should get less than that. And we have just processed the claim the way it's supposed to be. We shouldn't be doing that today. So yeah, I have pressure in terms of I don't know really what's going to happen in terms of my financial need. I rely on food stamp right now. I can't spend too much money. I don't have money to spend anyway. So I have to rely on my food stamp. I have 3 kids, as I said earlier. This is an issue, really. It's the pressure, is more pressure, especially when you have a kid you have to teach because the school is closed. I have like 6 years boy, so I have to teach my boy. And this is pressure on top of teaching my boy. I have to think about where am I going to get the money? Yeah, it's a pressure. It's painful. That's why really we really want to fight for, not only for us. I have situation where driver there's the delivery program under TLC. Somehow few of my friends have to wake up at 2 in the morning. They had to wake up at 2 in the morning, go to those pickup location, and some of them had to wait from 2 in the morning to 11 to get something done. Some even have to wait the whole day without having nothing. If you wake up at 5 in the morning and you get to the location for the delivery, you won't get nothing to do. there's nothing for you to do. It's something tricky. You look like it looks like there's work, but there's nothing to be done. Because you have so many drivers, they don't even know what to do. So they go to that specific, it's 100,000 drivers. Sometimes you only need like 2,500 a day. So you have 100,000 people and you only got like 2,500 work for those people. Obviously it's going to be like overwhelmed. There's no work. When it's come to the day, outside, there's nothing really. Look at the numbers of people, the number of workers versus how many people come out. The numbers doesn't match. It's just like it's a waste of your time to go outside and wait for a whole day without having nothing to do. That's why I personally haven't been working for like the past, since like March 16. I started working for multiple reasons. One of them is like, I'm not sure about, what's gonna happen to my kid if I go out. Because it's still there, the disease is still there. There's nothing clear about what to do really. A second thing is there's nothing really when you go out. I'm not gonna wake up at 2 in the morning and not even having something to be done when I get to a location. Why would I wake up in the morning and hoping to get something? You get there, there's nothing for you to do. And that's the reason why I don't really try to go out and try to do something, because I know for sure from experience of my fellow driver, there's nothing to be done really, because the number doesn't match. 25 delivery a day versus 100,000 people. There's nothing. It's a gap. The gap is huge.
Thank you, Seydou. Mr. Islam?
Yes. Yeah. I'm getting like $291 on the computer of a website, the Department of Labor account, but not in my account yet. The bank account. So I'm still now zero, and in my bank right now I'm like $85 negative. I think yes. And question is like, I want to go to work because of the frustration. I'm not getting money. But once I hear like some of my friends get sick already, they're delivering the food for the TLC, and they're sick. They're still in the home right now. They stopped working, so it's scaring me to go to work. So that's why I'm staying home. So I don't know when I'm gonna go back to work. That's the question. And my family, they don't want me to leave outside to go outside. So I'm waiting, and I don't know how I'm gonna, this $291 and $600 beside that they will give until July 31st. So after July 31st, with the $291, how I'm gonna survive, I don't know. If there is no vaccine or no medication, so I'm not able to, I believe I'm not able to work if I don't get any vaccination or something. That's a scary thing for me, to how I'm gonna survive. So it's still now like my friends, my cousin, my oldest daughter, she's living with the husband. They're helping me out, but I don't know how long they will help me. I'm behind three months already for my house rent, and still frustrated. That's it.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear up one thing. So there's state unemployment, and then there's the pandemic unemployment assistance, right? And so these numbers you're hearing, the 182 or 291, those would be for pandemic unemployment assistance. Now, on top of it, there's $600 from pandemic unemployment compensation, PUC.
Yes.
What's important to know is that the PUC, the additional $600, is automatic for everybody from April 5th until July 31st for every week. So, it doesn't, the extra $600 is really not the issue. Like, everybody's going to be getting that extra $600. The issue here is if you're getting the promise of 182 when you're really entitled to $504 under the law. And, I was describing to you all earlier, the process is meant for drivers that they have to apply for regular state unemployment, and then they have to fax in their earnings. Then they have to go and apply for pandemic unemployment assistance. And then they have to file what's called a reconsideration form, which is basically an appeal of the denial of regular state unemployment. They have to go through all of these extra steps just because the Department of Labor is not abiding by their own law. So there's, added time. Instead of 2 to 3 weeks, you're now waiting 8 to 10 weeks. Instead of getting $504 a week, you're getting $182 a week, right? Instead of being able to just fill out one form and be done with it, you're having to go through like 3 additional steps. So these are all unnecessary burdens, and they're being placed on the drivers in the worst moment of time, and only being done to protect the interests of these companies. This is unacceptable. Okay, don't know if anybody else has any more questions.
I think Stephen Wishnu has a question.
Oh, okay.
When I did a story on this a couple months ago, I asked Uber about it, and their attitude was, federal courts have said that black car drivers are, independent contractors, and New York State Department of Labor has to rule on each driver case by case, and we've changed our policies since the 2018 decision. So their attitude seemed to be that it was irrelevant.
Yeah, that's completely irrelevant. So the decision that they like to always talk about is a Fair Labor Standards Act case, which has nothing to do with state unemployment insurance. There have been Uber, companies try to argue decisions for one law in the context of another, and even when it would benefit the worker, the judge denies that. They say that's not the issue here, right? If you tried to go in and argue the unemployment decision in the Fair Labor Standards Act context, it wouldn't be persuasive. But what we know for sure is that in the unemployment context, this is a totally settled issue. And this notion that every driver has to be adjudicated one at a time is simply absurd. The system would not function if 100,000 people had to each take 100,000 cases up to the Court of Appeals to decide whether they would get UI. It's just mind-blowingly bogus. So that is not the case. We function under a system where the agencies and the courts have to follow the law of the case. When there's a binding case on point with similar sets of facts, they have to follow it. As for the argument that the facts have somehow changed since 2018, I would welcome the opportunity to argue the new record, because if anything, they only indicate the facts that Uber is more of an employer now. What we didn't have when we argued in 2016 was a system where Uber says if you don't maintain a certain star rating and do so many number of trips, we're not going to give you the freedom to work wherever and wherever you want, and we're going to give you an assigned time based on your rating of when you can sign up for blocked schedule times where you can work. So if anything, the developments since 2018 have only bolstered the decision we have on record: drivers are employees.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay. Any last words from any of our panelists? Okay. Well, let me just close it out and say thank you so much. And again, I want to, thank Seydou and Saiful in particular. Hernek Singh and Mr. Rahman were not able to come on the video call this afternoon, but I also want to thank both of them. We're really proud to be the union of the drivers, and these 4 gentlemen are 4 of the reasons why we're so proud that we get to do what we get to do. You are, your profiles of courage with everything that you do, serving the public on the streets every single day, and you remain profiles of courage and fighting for justice. This is a fundamental fight, I think, for working people across this state. If we allow the corporate interests of one sector to override the interests of workers. We set up a standard where all workers in every industry will become more vulnerable to having their rights just as easily taken away. And so this is a fight for the 100,000 men and women that work tirelessly for Uber, Lyft, and the FHV sector every single day, have earned these benefits. They're in the worst of their crisis. They should not be at 83% suffering food shortage and hunger. Over 70% have no ability to pay their rent right now. It's completely unacceptable. We know that the state is in a major crisis. The crisis of the drivers surrounding unemployment is not a crisis of COVID. It is a crisis of political failure. It needs to be fixed. Our members should not be punished because of the political failures of this administration that's a little too cozy with these companies. So thank you very much. Again, we want to thank all of you reporters. We know you're fellow essential workers. We follow everything that you're doing. We want to thank you for covering not only our story, but the story of all New Yorkers, especially in the conditions. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll be back. Driver power.
Union power.
Union power. Driver power. Union power.
Driver power.
Union power. Driver power.
Union power.
Yeah, that's union power. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.